Welcome to Speak English with me.
Improve your vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation with our engaging lessons.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Speak English with me. I'm Sam, and I'm really glad you're here. Whether you're listening on your morning commute, taking a walk, or relaxing at home after a long day, thanks for choosing to spend a little time with us.
And I'm Emma. We know there are so many podcasts you could listen to, so it means a lot that you're here with us. Our goal is always the same. We want to help you speak English in a way that feels natural, confident, and connected to real life, not just to grammar books.
Before we get started, here's one quick favor. If our podcast is helping you become a more confident English speaker, please follow the show and share it with another learner. Your support helps us create more conversations like this, and it helps more people discover practical English they can use every day.
Today's topic is one of my favorites because it's about an expression that almost every English learner knows. It's short, it's common, and it looks incredibly easy.
Those two words are, of course.
If I asked you what of course means, you'd probably think, well, that's easy.
That's what most learners think. They learn that of course means certainly or yes, and then they start using it everywhere.
Which sounds like a good idea until they begin having real conversations with native speakers.
That's where things become interesting. Native speakers don't hear only your words, they also hear your attitude, your tone, and the situation around those words.
Let me ask you something, Sam. Have you ever said something that was completely friendly, but someone understood it in a different way?
More than once. I remember helping an international student during a speaking class. She was very confident, and honestly, her English was impressive. Then another student asked her, "Do you work here?"
That's a simple question.
It was. She smiled and answered, "Of course."
Oh.
That was my reaction too.
She wasn't trying to sound rude, was she?
Not at all. In her mind, she was simply saying, "Yes, I do." But the way she said, "of course," made it sound a little like, "Why would you even ask me that?"
That's such an important lesson because the dictionary wasn't the problem. Her pronunciation wasn't the problem either. The challenge was understanding the feeling behind the expression.
And that's something many learners never get a chance to study. Most textbooks explain vocabulary, but they don't spend much time explaining emotions.
Which is funny because conversations are full of emotions. We don't only exchange information, we encourage people, comfort them, thank them, apologize, celebrate, and sometimes we accidentally sound impatient without meaning to.
That's why today's conversation isn't about memorizing another phrase. It's about understanding how native speakers actually use of course in everyday life.
Think about this. Imagine you ask your friend, "Can you help me carry these bags?" They smile and say, "Of course."
That feels warm.
It feels generous.
It almost feels like they're happy you asked.
Now imagine the same words with a different voice.
Of course.
Suddenly it feels colder.
Maybe even a little annoyed.
The words stayed the same, but the message changed.
That's one of the reasons English can feel confusing. Learners often look for one perfect answer. They ask, "What's the correct phrase?" But real conversations don't usually work like that.
Sometimes, of course, is the best choice. Sometimes, sure, sounds more natural. Sometimes people say, absolutely, no problem, or even just, yeah.
Native speakers make those choices without stopping to think about grammar.
They react to the person standing in front of them.
I think that's one of the biggest steps towards becoming fluent. You stop translating every sentence in your head, and you start responding naturally.
I remember reaching that point when I was learning another language. At first, every conversation felt like a math test. I was trying to build perfect sentences while the other person was already talking.
I know that feeling. Then one day, my teacher said something that completely changed my mindset. She told me, "Don't learn conversations, learn reactions."
I love that. So did I, because that's how people really communicate. We react, we laugh, we comfort our friends, we celebrate good news, we show surprise, we show excitement. Those little reactions make us sound human.
And of course is one of those reactions. Sometimes it shows kindness, sometimes confidence, sometimes reassurance, and if we're not careful, it can even sound a little impatient.
During today's conversation, we're going to explore those differences through real situations, natural dialogues, and lots of everyday examples. By the end, you'll have a much clearer feeling for when of course sounds friendly, when another expression works better, and why native speakers don't use it nearly as often as many learners think.
Now that we've talked about why of course can have different meanings, let's focus on the situations where it feels warm, friendly, and completely natural. This is probably the way you'll hear it most often. Native speakers don't use it because they want to sound clever, they use it because they want to make someone feel comfortable.
That's a great way to put it. Think about the feeling behind the words. Most of the time, of course, is another way of saying, you don't need to worry, or I'm happy to do that. It's reassuring, and that's why people like hearing it.
Let's imagine a simple situation. Your friend sends you a message saying, I'm running a little late. Could you wait for me for 10 minutes?
I'd answer, of course, don't rush, I'll be here.
Notice that you didn't stop after saying of course.
Native speakers rarely do. We usually add another sentence because conversations keep moving. Of course opens the door, and the next sentence shows your attitude.
That's something listeners should start paying attention to. If you only memorize 2 words, your English can sound short or even a little cold. But if you naturally continue the conversation, everything feels much more relaxed.
Here's another example. Imagine you're visiting my house for the first time. You look around for a moment and ask, can I have a glass of water?
You'd probably say, of course, I'll get one for you.
Or maybe, of course, help yourself. The glasses are in the kitchen.
Both answers sound friendly because they don't simply give permission, they also make the guest feel welcome.
That's one reason I enjoy listening to native conversations. You notice that people are often thinking about the other person's comfort, not only about answering the question.
Here's a situation from work. A new colleague walks over and says, sorry, could you explain how this system works? I'm still learning.
I wouldn't want that person to feel embarrassed, so I'd smile and say, of course, it looks confusing at first, but you'll get used to it.
I like that answer because you're doing 2 things at once. You're saying yes, and you're encouraging the other person.
Encouragement is a huge part of natural English. Sometimes the words after, of course, are even more important than the expression.
That reminds me of my first week at a new job years ago. I felt nervous about asking questions because everyone else seemed so experienced. Finally, I asked one of my coworkers if she could show me how to use a computer program I'd never seen before.
What did she say?
She smiled and said, of course, I remember my first week too.
That's such a kind response.
It really was. She could have simply said yes, but by sharing that little personal comment, she made me feel much less anxious.
Those are the conversations people remember. We don't usually remember perfect grammar. We remember how someone made us feel.
Let's try another example. Imagine a child asks a parent, will you come to my school concert tomorrow?
Most parents would happily answer, of course I will. I wouldn't miss it.
You can almost hear the love in that sentence.
And that's why tone matters so much. The words are simple, but the emotion behind them is powerful.
Here's a useful tip for everyone listening. When someone asks for help, permission, or a small favor, don't think of course as the finish line. Think of it as the beginning of your answer.
That's wonderful advice because it encourages you to keep the conversation flowing. Try adding one more sentence every time. For example, of course, let me help you. Of course, take your time. Of course, I'd be happy to. Of course, come on in.
Those short combinations sound incredibly natural, and you'll hear them in everyday life all the time. Here's a little challenge for you. The next time you're watching an English film, series, or YouTube video, listen carefully whenever someone says, of course. Don't just focus on those 2 words. Listen to the rest of the sentence that comes next. You'll start noticing that native speakers almost always use the rest of the sentence to show kindness, support, or reassurance.
And once you begin hearing that pattern, you'll find yourself doing it naturally too. That's one of the best parts of learning through real conversations instead of isolated vocabulary lists.
So don't be afraid of using of course. Just remember that it's more than a simple yes. When you say it with a warm tone and follow it with a helpful sentence, it becomes one of the friendliest expressions in everyday English. So far, we've been looking at the friendly side of course. Now let's turn the conversation around, because this is where many English learners become surprised. The same two words that can sound warm and welcoming can also sound impatient, dismissive, or even a little rude if they're used in the wrong moment or with the wrong tone.
I think this is one of the biggest differences between learning English from a textbook and learning it from real conversations. A textbook usually tells you what an expression means, but real life teaches you how that expression makes people feel.
Let me ask you something. Have you ever received a text message that seemed unfriendly, even though the person probably didn't mean it that way?
Oh, many times. Then I meet that person later and they're smiling and perfectly nice. The problem wasn't the relationship, it was that I couldn't hear their voice or see their face.
Spoken English works in a similar way. Your tone carries a lot of information. Imagine I ask, "Did you remember to send the email?"
If you answer with a relaxed smile and say, "Of course," everything feels normal.
But imagine I cross my arms, sigh a little, and say, "Of course."
Suddenly it feels as if you're saying, "Why would you even ask me that?"
That's the hidden message people sometimes hear. And the interesting part is that you may not intend that message at all.
That's why I often tell students not to think only about vocabulary. Think about the person listening to you.
Here's a situation that happens quite often. Someone is trying to be polite and asks, "Is it okay if I sit here?"
You could answer, "Of course." That's completely natural if your voice is friendly.
But if your voice sounds flat or impatient, the other person may suddenly wonder if they've asked a silly question.
The words stay the same, but the emotional meaning changes.
I remember meeting an English learner during a workshop who asked me about this very problem. He said, "People are always nice to me, but sometimes they look surprised after I answer."
Did you figure out why?
We practiced a few conversations together, and one pattern appeared again and again. Whenever someone asked him a simple question, he answered every single one with a very strong "of course."
Every question?
Every single one. "Can I open the window?" "Of course." "Could you send me the file?" "Of course." "Do you have a minute?" "Of course."
I can see what happened. Nothing he said was wrong, but saying the same expression every time can make conversations sound less natural.
That's one lesson native speakers learn without thinking about it. They naturally vary their language.
Sometimes they say sure, sometimes no problem, sometimes go ahead, sometimes I'd be happy to.
Variety makes your English sound more relaxed.
Here's another example. Imagine your manager asks, "Could you join us for a meeting at 2?" You answer, "Of course." That's perfectly fine. Now imagine your manager asks, "Did you finish the report we discussed yesterday?" If you quickly reply, "Of course," with a sharp tone, it might sound as if you're offended by the question.
Even though your real meaning was simply, "Yes, I finished it."
That's why context matters so much.
There's another reason learners sometimes use "of course." In many languages, there's a direct translation that people use all the time, so it feels natural to do the same thing in English.
That's a great point. We all carry habits from our first language into the language we're learning. There's nothing unusual about that. The important thing is noticing those habits and adjusting them little by little.
Let's compare two conversations. The first one, "Could you help me with this box?" "Of course." The conversation ends there.
It isn't wrong, but it feels unfinished.
Now listen to this version. "Could you help me with this box?" "Of course. Where would you like me to put it?"
That sounds much more like real life.
You're answering the question and keeping the conversation moving at the same time.
Native speakers do that naturally because they're thinking about the next step, not just the first answer.
Here's another small detail that's easy to miss. Sometimes native speakers don't say "of course" because they want to avoid sounding too certain.
That's true. If someone asks, "Do you think this plan will work?" you probably wouldn't answer, "Of course," unless you were completely confident.
You might say, "I think so,"
Or, "Hopefully."
or "There's a good chance."
Those answers leave room for uncertainty, and that's often more honest.
So here's today's challenge. As you listen to English this week, don't count how many times people say, of course. Instead, ask yourself why they chose it in that moment. Were they comforting someone, giving permission, offering help, or showing confidence?
Once you start noticing the reason behind the expression instead of only the expression itself, your English becomes much more natural. And that's the point we're aiming for. Because sounding natural isn't about using bigger words. It's about choosing the right words for the right moment and saying them in a way that makes the other person feel comfortable.
We've spent a lot of time talking about of course, but here's something that surprises many learners. Native speakers actually have several other expressions that they use just as often, and sometimes even more often, depending on the situation.
That's one reason real conversations sound so varied. If every answer was, of course, people would begin to sound like robots. Instead, they naturally switch between different expressions without even thinking about it.
Let's compare a few of them, because the differences are small, but they're useful. Imagine I ask, could you send me that document after lunch?
I could answer, of course.
Or,
I could answer, sure.
which one sounds more casual to you?
Sure. It's short, relaxed, and you'll hear it constantly among friends, coworkers, and family members.
I agree. If someone held a door open for me and asked, need any help carrying those bags? I'd probably answer, sure, thanks.
Or if a friend asked, want to grab a coffee after work? You might simply say, sure, that sounds nice.
Now let's look at another one. Absolutely.
I love this one because it sounds more enthusiastic. Imagine someone asks, would you like to come to our wedding?
My answer would probably be absolutely. We'd love to come.
That little bit of extra excitement makes a difference. If you only said yes, the answer would still be polite, but absolutely shows genuine happiness.
Here's another example. Someone asks, do you think this movie is worth watching?
Absolutely.
That tells the other person you're very confident about your opinion.
Here's one that English learners hear all the time. No problem.
This expression is incredibly common after someone thanks you. Imagine I hold the elevator for you. You smile and say, thanks so much.
I'd probably answer, no problem.
Or, you're welcome. Both are natural, but no problem often sounds a little more relaxed in everyday conversation. Here's another interesting one. My pleasure.
That's a bit more formal. You might hear it in a nice hotel, an expensive restaurant, or from someone working in customer service.
Imagine a waiter brings your meal. You say, thank you. They reply, my pleasure.
It sounds warm, professional, and polite.
Now let's talk about certainly.
That's another expression learners sometimes forget. Certainly is perfectly natural, but it appears more often in formal situations.
For example, if you're speaking with a customer, a client, or someone you've just met.
Imagine someone asks, could I speak with Mr. Taylor? You answer, certainly. One moment, please.
That sounds much more natural than saying, sure, in a formal business setting.
Now here's one I hear all the time. No worries.
I hear that all the time too.
Imagine your friend arrives 5 minutes late and says, sorry for keeping you waiting. I'd probably smile and say, no worries.
It's another way of saying, everything's fine.
What's interesting is that none of these expressions replace each other perfectly.
That's true. They're like different tools. You choose the one that matches the situation.
That's a great comparison. If your best friend asks, can I borrow your jacket? You might naturally say, sure. If your grandmother asks whether you'll visit her this weekend, you might happily say, of course. If your colleague asks whether you'll attend an important meeting, you might answer, certainly.
And if someone thanks you for helping them carry heavy boxes, you might smile and say, no problem.
Native speakers aren't following grammar rules in those moments. They're simply choosing the response that feels right.
Here's a small exercise you can try this week. Instead of memorizing one expression, write down 5. Of course. Sure. Absolutely. No problem. Certainly.
Then create one simple situation for each expression. Read them out loud. Imagine you're talking to a real person instead of reading from a vocabulary list.
You'll notice something interesting. The more you imagine real people in real situations, the easier it becomes to remember which expression sounds the most natural.
That's because our brains remember stories and emotions much better than isolated words.
Before we finish today's teaching, I have one final thought. Don't worry about sounding like every native speaker you meet. They don't all speak the same way either. Some people say sure all the time. Others love saying absolutely. Some people hardly ever use of course.
That's one of the beautiful things about language. There's room for personality. As your confidence grows, you'll naturally discover the expressions that feel most comfortable for you. The goal isn't to copy one speaker perfectly. The goal is to understand the choices native speakers make so you can make your own with confidence.
We've covered quite a lot today, and I hope one thing stands out more than anything else. Of course, isn't just another item on a vocabulary list. It's an expression that carries emotion, intention, and personality. Once you understand that, you'll start hearing it in a completely different way.
I hope you're also leaving this episode feeling more confident instead of more nervous. Sometimes after learning that a simple phrase can have different meanings, people become afraid of using it. Please don't let that happen. Making mistakes is part of learning, and every conversation teaches you something new.
That's such an important reminder. The goal isn't to speak perfect English every single time. The goal is to connect with people. If someone understands your kindness, your curiosity, and your willingness to communicate, you've already achieved something much bigger than perfect grammar.
And here's some good news. The more you listen to real English, the more these patterns become automatic. One day, you'll hear someone say, "of course," and you'll immediately understand whether they're comforting a friend, giving permission, showing confidence, or simply being polite. You won't have to stop and analyze every word.
Before we say goodbye, let's do a quick speaking challenge together. If you're somewhere you can speak out loud, try answering these questions naturally. If you're in a public place, you can simply answer in your head.
Ready?
Your friend asks, "Can you pick me up from the train station tomorrow evening?"
I might answer, "of course. Just tell me what time your train arrives."
Great. Here's another one. Your coworker says, "Would you mind checking this report before I send it?"
Of course. Send it over whenever you're ready.
Nice. Now imagine your neighbor asks, "Could you water my plants while I'm on vacation?"
Of course. I don't mind at all.
See what happened there? Every answer continued naturally. We didn't stop after saying, "of course." We added another sentence that sounded warm, supportive, and helpful.
That's a habit worth building because it makes your conversations flow much more smoothly.
Now it's time for our word tour, where we quickly revisit some useful expressions from today's episode.
Our first expression is reassure. If you reassure someone, you help them stop feeling worried. For example, I reassured my friend that everything would be fine.
Next is tone. Tone is the way your voice sounds when you speak. The same sentence can have completely different meanings depending on your tone.
Then we have permission. Permission means allowing someone to do something. For example, my teacher gave me permission to leave early.
Here's another useful word, enthusiastic. If someone is enthusiastic, they're full of energy and excitement. For example, she was enthusiastic about starting her new job.
And finally, context. Context means the situation around the words you're using. Understanding the context often helps you understand the speaker's real meaning.
Here's a little mission for you before our next episode. Over the next few days, pay attention whenever you hear someone say, "of course." It could be in a podcast, a television series, a film, or even a conversation with a friend. Don't just listen to the expression. Listen to the voice, the situation, and the sentence that comes after it. Those little details will teach you far more than simply memorizing a definition.
We'd also love to hear from you. Think about today's topic and ask yourself this question. Have you ever used an English expression correctly but still felt that something sounded a little strange? Maybe the grammar was right, but the conversation didn't feel completely natural. Those moments often become our best learning experiences because they help us notice the small details that make English sound alive.
If you enjoyed today's conversation and found it helpful, don't forget to follow the podcast so you never miss a new episode. And if you know someone who's learning English, share this episode with them. You might save them from making the same little mistakes that almost every learner makes at some point.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us. We hope today's conversation helps you feel a little more confident the next time someone asks you for help, for permission, or simply for a favor. Until next time, keep listening, keep speaking, keep enjoying the learning process, and remember that every real conversation brings you one step closer to sounding natural in English. Take care, and we'll see you in the next episode.